This is a saltwater cell. $10 of materials, a strip of metal, a piece of carbon, and a jar of salt water. It has no lithium in it, no cobalt, nothing that can catch fire, and nothing inside it that expires on a shelf. Emergency lights built on this principle sit in lockers and life jackets for 10, 15, 20 years, completely inert, and then produce light the moment they touch water. No charging, no maintenance, no expiry date to check. And here's the honest part stated up front, because almost nobody covering this will say it plainly. That 10-year figure is shelf life, not runtime. This cell does not run a lamp continuously for a decade, and anybody implying otherwise is selling something. What it does is sit dry and dead for a decade, holding its full capacity, and then deliver light for days or weeks once you activate it with water. That sounds like a downgrade until you understand what it actually solves, and then it turns out to be the entire point. Stay with me, because the reason navies and rescue services have used this for generations is exactly that trade. Let me start with the problem it was built for, because it is a problem no chemical battery solves well. Every battery you own is dying right now, not from use, but from simply existing. A lithium cell loses capacity on the shelf, whether you touch it or not, and left long enough it will not accept a charge at all. Alkaline cells leak, and anybody who has opened a torch that sat in a drawer for 5 years has found the white crust that ruined it. Even the good ones carry an expiry date printed on the wrapper. Now consider the situation where that matters most. A life jacket in a locker on a ship, an emergency beacon on a lifeboat, a torch in a bag that has to work after 10 years of being ignored on the one night it is needed. Batteries are precisely the wrong technology for that job, because you are asking a device that degrades continuously to be at full strength at an unknown point in the distant future. The answer engineers arrived at is elegant. You build a battery that is missing one ingredient. Leave out the electrolyte, meaning the conductive liquid that lets the reaction proceed, and nothing happens. The metal cannot corrode. No current flows, no capacity is lost. The device is chemically frozen indefinitely. Then, at the moment you need it, you add the missing ingredient, and salt water is the cheapest and most available electrolyte on Earth. That is a water-activated battery, and it has been standard marine safety equipment for a very long time. Now the physics, because it is simpler than people expect. Any battery needs 3 things: 2 different materials that want electrons to different degrees, and something between them that lets charged particles move. Put a reactive metal like magnesium and salt water alongside a less reactive material, such as carbon, and connect them with a wire, and the magnesium begins giving up electrons. Those electrons travel out through your wire, around your circuit, and back to the carbon, where they complete the reaction with oxygen and water. That flow through the wire is your current. And here's the part that matters most for understanding this honestly. The energy is not coming from the salt water. It is coming from the metal. The salt water is the road. The magnesium is the fuel, and it is being consumed the entire time the cell runs, dissolving slowly into the solution. When the metal is gone, the cell is finished, which tells you everything about what this technology is and is not. It is a primary battery, meaning single use, with its fuel visible as a strip of metal you can hold in your hand. You are not making free energy. You are burning magnesium very slowly, and salt water is what lets the burning happen. Once you see it that way, every design decision follows, and so does the 10-year figure, since dry metal simply sits there indefinitely. So the obvious question is who actually uses this, and this answer stretches back to the beginning of electricity itself. Start in 1800. Alessandro Volta assembled the first true battery in history, a stack of alternating zinc and copper discs separated by cloth or cardboard soaked in brine. That is the voltaic pile, the device that gave us the word volt, and the electrolyte in it was salt water. Every battery that has ever existed descends from that stack, and the original ran on exactly the principle we are discussing. It is worth appreciating what that moment actually was. Before 1800, electricity was a curiosity produced by rubbing glass and stored briefly in jars, and it arrived only as a sudden discharge. Nobody had a source that could deliver a steady, continuous current. Volta's pile changed that overnight, and within weeks of the announcement, researchers across Europe were using continuous current to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and within a few years, to isolate elements nobody had ever seen in pure form. Modern chemistry effectively begins with a stack of metal discs and brine-soaked cardboard, and the detail that matters here is the one nobody mentions. Volta himself misunderstood his own invention. He believed the electricity came from the contact between the two metals, and that the liquid was merely a conductor. It took decades of argument before it was settled that the reaction with the electrolyte and the consumption of the metal was where the energy actually came from. So the confusion at the heart of every viral saltwater battery video, the belief that the salt water is somehow the power source, is the same mistake the man who built the first battery made, and it took the scientific community a generation to correct it. Now the marine scale, which is where this technology found its permanent home. Look closely at a life jacket the next time you're on a ferry or an aircraft. There is a small light attached to it, and in a great many designs, that light contains no conventional battery at all. It is a water-activated cell, sealed and inert, that begins producing light the instant it is immersed. The logic is inescapable. That jacket may hang in a locker for a decade. It must work the first time, in the dark, in the water, with nobody available to check it beforehand. A conventional battery cannot promise that. A dry metal strip can. The same approach appears in marine beacons, emergency locator equipment, and rescue lighting, and it has been in service for generations precisely because it removes the maintenance question entirely. Then the emergency and off-grid scale, which is where consumers actually meet it. Water-activated lanterns are sold commercially for exactly this purpose. You fill a chamber with salt water, the lamp runs for a long stretch on that fill, and when the output fades, you pour the water out and refill it. Eventually, the metal rod inside is consumed, and you replace the rod, which is a cheap consumable. Those lanterns are marketed to households in flood-prone and storm-prone regions, and to remote communities without reliable power. For the same reason, navies use the technology. There is nothing to charge, nothing to expire, and no fuel to store. And then the grid scale, which is the story with the most interesting ending. A company called Aqueon Energy manufactured a completely different kind of saltwater battery. This one, rechargeable, built around a saltwater electrolyte with abundant materials and no flammable chemistry whatsoever. Their cells were designed to cycle thousands of times, were genuinely non-toxic, and could not catch fire under any circumstances, which is not a claim lithium can make. The technology worked. The company filed for bankruptcy in 2017. The non-flammable point deserves more than a passing mention, since it is the one axis where saltwater chemistry is genuinely untouchable. A lithium battery that is damaged, overcharged, or manufactured with a defect can enter what engineers call thermal runaway, meaning the cell heats itself, which accelerates the reaction, which produces more heat in a loop that ends in fire. Those fires are difficult to extinguish because the cell supplies its own oxidizer, which is why they make the news. A saltwater cell simply cannot do that. There is no flammable electrolyte and no runaway pathway. Puncture it, and salt water comes out. Overheat it, and nothing dramatic happens. For a battery in a basement, a boat, a school, or anywhere fire risk carries real weight. That is a serious advantage, and it is why the technology keeps attracting interest despite losing on cost. It just turned out that not catching fire on its own does not beat being half the size and a third of the price. That failure is worth understanding because it explains this entire field better than any conspiracy would. Aqueon's batteries were heavier and bulkier per unit of stored energy than lithium, and lithium prices were falling fast. In a market where energy density and cost per kilowatt hour decide everything, being non-flammable and made of salt was not enough to win. Which brings me to why you cannot walk into a hardware store and buy a saltwater home battery. And the answer is neither paperwork nor suppression. It is energy density. Saltwater chemistry is heavy and bulky for the energy it holds. For a phone or a car, that is fatal, since you have to carry the thing. For a home battery, it is merely uncompetitive against a falling lithium price. So the technology went where its actual advantages matter, which is anywhere that shelf life, safety, and simplicity outrank size and weight. Marine safety equipment, emergency lighting, places where a battery must work after 10 years of neglect. That is not a technology in hiding. It is a technology correctly deployed in the places where it wins and largely absent everywhere else. This channel exists for exactly this kind of straight answer, one honest method a week, and subscribing is how those keep arriving. Now the arithmetic, so you know exactly what you're getting. A single saltwater cell of the kind you can build produces somewhere around half a volt to a volt and a half, depending on your metal pairing, and delivers current in the milliamp range for a modest electrode. That is enough to light an LED directly, which is genuinely satisfying to see, and nowhere near enough to charge a phone at any useful rate. Stack cells in series and the voltages add, which is how you reach the 3 volts an LED torch wants, or the 5 volts a USB device expects. Stack them in parallel, and the currents add. Commercial water-activated lanterns do exactly this internally, combining cells and a small circuit to deliver usable light for many hours from one fill. The runtime depends on 2 things and nothing else. How much metal you have, since that is your fuel, and how hard you are drawing on it. A thin strip of magnesium running an LED will last far longer than the same strip trying to run something demanding, and when the metal is visibly eaten away, the cell is finished. So the honest expectation is this. A homemade cell lights an LED. A stack of them runs a small lamp for hours to days per fill. Neither will charge your phone properly, and none of it is a substitute for a battery bank. To put a number on that trade, consider what a modern LED actually needs. A small indicator LED draws a few milliamps, and a useful reading lamp, perhaps 100 to 200. That is a difference of 50 times between the two jobs, and it is why a cell that lights one comfortably struggles badly with the other, which means the sensible target for a homemade build is not brightness, but duration. A dim, steady glow that runs all night through a power cut from a jar on a table is genuinely valuable and entirely achievable. A bright lamp for 4 hours is a different and much harder ask. Commercial water-activated lanterns solve this by combining a well-designed cell stack with a properly efficient LED and a driver circuit, which is why a bought unit outperforms a jar by a wide margin for the same chemistry. But that comparison misses the point, and here's the category where this genuinely has no competitor. Emergency preparedness has one hard problem, which is that everything you store degrades while you wait. Batteries lose charge. Fuel goes stale. Chargers need power that will not be there, and the entire value of the kit depends on it working on a day you cannot predict. A dry metal strip, a bag of salt, and a jar solve that completely. There is nothing to rotate, nothing to check, and nothing to charge. It sits in a cupboard for a decade doing absolutely nothing, and produces light the moment you pour water into it. Add to that the fact that salt water is available almost everywhere, including from the ocean directly, and that the cell cannot catch fire or vent anything hazardous under normal use, and you have a light source for exactly the scenario where every other option has failed. That is what this technology is for, not daily power. The night everything else is dead. So store it accordingly, and there is a right way to do that. Keep the metal dry and separate, wrapped in paper or plastic, since the whole advantage evaporates if it sits in a damp shed, slowly corroding on its own. Keep the salt with it in a sealed bag, because the one time you will want this is the one time you may not be able to reach a shop. Label the container with what it is and how to use it, since a bag of metal strips and carbon rods means nothing to anyone who finds it in 5 years, including you. And build one now, today, and test it, rather than storing untested parts. That is the difference between preparedness and hoarding, and it takes 20 minutes. The commercial versions follow the same logic, shipping dry with the metal sealed and a printed instruction to add water, and they are worth buying if you would rather not build. The point is not the making. The point is that something in your cupboard will produce light after a decade of neglect. Now let me show you how to build one. The container is any non-conductive vessel that holds liquid. A glass jar, a plastic tub, or a cut bottle all work, and cost nothing. The anode is your fuel and your most important choice. Which metal you pick is not arbitrary, and there's a proper ordering behind it that engineers call the galvanic series. It ranks metals by how eagerly they give up electrons in a conductive solution. At the reactive end sit magnesium, then zinc, then aluminium, then iron. At the noble end sit copper, then graphite, then silver and gold, which resist giving anything up. The rule that follows is simple. The further apart your two materials sit on that list, the higher the voltage your cell produces. Magnesium paired with carbon sits about as far apart as you can practically get with cheap materials, which is exactly why it is the standard choice, and why the same pairing turns up in commercial water-activated equipment. Zinc and copper, the pairing Volta used, sits closer together and produces less, which is one reason his pile needed so many disks stacked to do anything useful. And this same ranking explains something you may already own. The magnesium rod inside a water heater is there precisely because magnesium is more reactive than the steel tank around it, so it corrodes first and protects the tank. Plumbers call it a sacrificial anode, and they replace it when it is eaten away. That rod is manufactured by the million, sold cheaply in every hardware store, and it is the best value source of magnesium a home builder can get. You are simply choosing to catch the energy of that corrosion in a wire instead of letting a plumber throw it away. Magnesium performs best, and magnesium anode rods sold for water heaters are a cheap and widely available source, running roughly $10 to $20 for a rod that will make many cells. Aluminium works and is even cheaper, though it forms an oxide layer that can slow it down. Zinc works and is the traditional choice going back to Volta, and galvanized material is zinc-coated. The cathode wants to be conductive, corrosion-resistant, and as high in surface area as possible. Carbon is the standard answer. Activated carbon, graphite rods, carbon felt, or a carbon rod salvaged from an old zinc carbon battery all work, and cost a few dollars. The electrolyte is salt water, and concentration matters more than people expect. Roughly a tablespoon of salt to a cup of water is a sensible starting point, and you can experiment upward. More salt means better conductivity up to a point, beyond which you gain nothing. Assembly takes minutes. Suspend the metal and the carbon in the solution without letting them touch, attach a wire to each, and measure. You should see voltage immediately, unlike the mud battery, since there is no biology to establish here. To make it useful, wire several cells in series to raise the voltage. 2 or 3 cells will light an LED comfortably. 4 or more with a small boost circuit costing a few dollars will drive a proper lamp. Keep the cells electrically isolated from each other, meaning separate containers, since sharing one body of salt water lets the cells short through the liquid and cancels the gain. Total build cost lands between $10 and $30, and most of that is the magnesium. A few practical notes that make the difference between a cell that works and one that disappoints. Surface area drives current. A folded or perforated electrode with plenty of area beats a smooth strip of the same footprint. And if your current is disappointing, this is almost always why. Spacing matters too. Bring the electrodes closer together and resistance falls so long as they never touch, since touching shorts the cell entirely. Clean metal is essential. Sand or scrub any oxide, paint, or coating off before you start, because that layer is an insulator, and aluminium in particular arrives with one already formed. And yes, seawater works directly, and it works well, since it is essentially the same solution at roughly 3.5% salinity. That is genuinely useful in a coastal emergency, where the electrolyte is unlimited and free. If your voltage reads fine, but nothing happens when you connect a load, that is high internal resistance, and the fix is more area, closer spacing, and a stronger solution. If the voltage falls away over hours, look at your electrodes. Since a white deposit building up is the reaction fouling its own surfaces, lift them out, scrub them, and the cell recovers. Now, the section of the sponsored videos skip because this has real limits, and an honest account owes them the same volume as the praise. The first is that the metal is consumed, which makes this a fuel-burning device with a finite supply. Once your magnesium is eaten, you replace it. That is not a flaw, since it is exactly how the commercial lanterns work, but nobody should imagine otherwise. The second is that it is not rechargeable. Do not attempt to push current back into a primary cell like this, since you achieve nothing useful and you may produce gas. The third is output, which is small. Milliamps, not amps. LEDs and small electronics, not appliances. The fourth is corrosion, and it is messy. The reaction produces metal hydroxide, which builds up as a white deposit on your electrodes and gradually reduces performance. Cells need cleaning, and long-term storage of an activated cell is not practical, which is why the commercial versions are designed to be emptied between uses. The fifth is that performance drops as the solution ages and as the electrode surfaces foul, so output is highest immediately after a fresh fill and declines from there. And the sixth is that if you want stored electricity for daily use, this is the wrong tool entirely, and a conventional battery beats it in every measure that matters. This wins on shelf life and on nothing else. The safety picture is straightforward but not empty. The reaction of reactive metals in salt water produces hydrogen gas, which is flammable, and although the quantities from a small cell are tiny, that means you never seal the container airtight, and you keep the cell away from open flame. Vent it or leave it open. The corrosion reaction generates some heat, and a large magnesium electrode in strong solution can get noticeably warm, so do not build something enormous on a wooden shelf and walk away from it. The solution and the deposits are not toxic in the dramatic sense, and they are not something you want on food surfaces or in a drinking vessel. Keep the cells separate from the kitchen, wash your hands, and never let anyone drink from the jar. Do not use these cells to make water drinkable, since they do the opposite of purification. And keep them out of reach of small children and pets, as with anything involving salt, metal, and wires. The ledger for the whole story, then. A jar or plastic container, nothing to $3. A magnesium anode rod, $10 to $20, enough for many cells in many years. Carbon electrodes, a few dollars. Salt, essentially nothing. Wire and an LED, a couple of dollars. A boost circuit if you want a usable lamp, $5 to $10. Total, $10 to $30 for a light source that will sit inert in a cupboard for a decade and work the night you need it. Here's the thing worth keeping from all of it. The first battery in history ran on salt water, and 2 centuries later the same chemistry is still bolted to life jackets because it solves a problem that no advance in lithium has touched. Not how much energy you can store, but whether it will still be there after 10 years of being ignored. We optimized batteries relentlessly for capacity and weight, which was the right thing to do, and in doing so, we built a world of energy storage that quietly dies on the shelf. The technology that does not die on the shelf was never suppressed and never lost. It simply lost the contest that mattered commercially and retreated to the one job where its single advantage is the only thing anyone cares about. Which is worth remembering the next time you open a drawer, pick up a torch you have not used in 5 years, and find it dead. Everything this channel has gathered on power that keeps working when the ordinary options fail, the trickle sources, the storage, the real numbers and the real limits, lives in one place, linked right below. And the comments are where this one earns its keep. Have you ever seen one of these lights on a life jacket or used a water-activated lantern? And if you have built a saltwater cell, tell me what metal pairing you used and what your meter read, because that detail is where all the performance hides. As for the cell that runs on living bacteria in ordinary mud, produces electricity for months without being touched, and was discovered in 1911, that is on screen right now. Different chemistry, same trickle. Till next time.